Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. Today, President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris have sworn in as the 46th President and Vice President of the United States in front of the Capitol. To ensure the success of the inauguration ceremony, the Capitol is under heavy security. Since last week, troops from the National Guard were pulled from duty to safeguard Washington, D.C. Some 25,000 armed men have been deployed for security, turning the U.S. Capitol into a military fortress. In contrast, when President Trump was inaugurated in 2017, only 8,000 security guards were in place. Biden's inauguration ceremony is probably the smallest in modern history in terms of the size of the crowd. Normally on Inauguration Day, you would expect over 100,000 people to gather on the National Mall between the Capitol building and the Washington Monument. This year, the Presidential Inauguration Committee installed flags of the U.S. states and territories, as well as 191,500 American flags of varying sizes on the grassy park to represent the American people who cannot attend Biden's inauguration. Around 1,000 special guests were invited to the ceremony, mostly members of Congress and celebrities. But instead of going further into details about Biden's ceremony today, we want to devote most of our episode to President Trump, as a way of our tribute to him and his administration's hard work for American people in the past 4 years. As I was listening to Joe Biden's well-crafted speech, it had an emptiness to it that was very evident. It was void of that magnanimous energy we felt when Trump gave his inspiring inauguration speech 4 years ago. I want to highlight a few key points from Trump's speech and reflect together with you on what he did after that. What you'll find is that Trump is a man of his word, and what he said he was going to do in 2017 is exactly what he did. Here are 4 points from Trump's speech at his 2017 inauguration. Now, the first quote I want to quote is, "The oath of office I take today is an oath of allegiance to all Americans. For many decades, we've enriched foreign industry at the expense of the American industry, subsidized the armies of other countries while allowing for the very sad depletion of our military." End quote. As a strong and effective leader, Trump immediately rebuilt the United States military with over $2.2 trillion in defense spending, including $738 billion for 2020. He also secured pay raises for our service members and their families, including the largest raise in a decade. He also modernized and recapitalized our nuclear forces and missile defenses to ensure they continue to serve as a strong deterrent, and upgraded our cyber defenses by elevating the Cyber Command into a major warfighting command and by reducing burdensome procedural restrictions on cyber operations. The second point I will quote is, "We will seek friendship and goodwill with the nations of the world." End quote. When it came to friendship and goodwill with nations of the world, Trump was the first president to meet with a leader of North Korea and the first sitting president to cross the demilitarized zone into North Korea. And he also brokered the historic peace agreement between Israel and Arab Muslim countries, including the United Arab Emirates, the Kingdom of Bahrain, and Sudan, an achievement that many thought was impossible. The third quote I took from his inauguration speech is, and I quote, "The Bible tells us how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. We must speak our minds openly, debate our disagreements honestly, but always pursue solidarity. When America is united, America is totally unstoppable." End quote. As we know, right to the end, President Trump fought for the repeal of Section 230, for Americans to maintain their constitutional right to free speech and to continue to have open debates so we can discuss our nation's disagreements with civility. Trump understood this far too well, the dangers of the giant tech companies, as they silenced him and now proceed to silence all conservative voices. Now, the last point I want to share with all of you is, and I quote, "Today's ceremony, however, has a very special meaning because today we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C. and giving it back to you, the people." End quote. This idea of transferring power to the people was inspiring and profound. For too long, the American government grew too large, too secretive, too wasteful, and the list just goes on. The reason why we all respected President Trump was that he recognized this and was, number one, not afraid to say it and say it to people's faces, And number two, most importantly, he was not in the pockets of any lobbyist, and without such evil constraints that are the norm in Washington, Trump was in the position to do something about it. Here are just a few things our commander-in-chief did to give the power back to the people. He issued directives requiring federal agencies to hire United States workers first and prioritizing the hiring of United States workers wherever possible. He suspended the entry of low-wage workers that threatened American jobs. He also promoted second chance hiring to give former inmates the opportunity to live crime-free lives and find meaningful employment. And righteously, he represented the American people by being the first president to convene a meeting at the United Nations to end religious persecution. As I said, Trump is truly a man of his word. Trump left Washington before Biden's inauguration. This is the first time in more than a century since Andrew Johnson that a sitting president refused to attend the inauguration of his successor. Upon departing the White House in the morning, Trump and the First Lady Melania thanked his supporters and the media at the South Lawn. Trump left the White House with Melania in Marine One early in the morning and headed to Joint Base Andrews for this farewell ceremony where the rest of the Trump family and his supporters had been waiting for the arrival of Trump and the First Lady to send them off. Trump and Melania arrived at Joint Base Andrews around 8:30 in the morning. They were greeted with a red carpet, 21-gun salute, and the music Hail to the Chief blaring in the background. As soon as Trump and the First Lady approached the long-awaiting crowd, his supporters started chanting. Trump made a short speech. He first thanked his family, friends, and staff. Trump praised the First Lady Melania, a woman of great grace, beauty, and dignity. Trump also sent his gratitude to Vice President Mike Pence and Congress members. He promised he will always fight for Americans and wished the best of luck and success to the new administration. Let's watch towards the end of his speech. Trump told the crowd that he will be back in some form, and his supporters bursted into cheers. Air Force One has taken Trump and all his family back to Mar-a-Lago in Florida. President Trump's official farewell message was delivered in video yesterday. He listed uniting the world against the Chinese Communist Party as one of his key accomplishments over the past 4 years. The farewell address lasted about 20 minutes. President Trump also said he was truly proud of those shared accomplishments as he approaches the end of his term. He stated that it has been an unspeakable honor to serve as President of the United States and thanked the American people for giving him the extraordinary privilege. He calmly declared the power transition with the next administration. With a generous heart, he prayed that the new administration taking office today will succeed in ensuring America's security and prosperity. He said, and I quote, "We extend our best wishes and we also want them to have luck," end of quote. However, President Trump remained reluctant to publicly mention the name Joe Biden. In his speech, President Trump revisited the attack on the Capitol building back on the 6th. He stressed that political violence is an attack on everything that Americans cherish and will never be tolerated. More than ever, it is now necessary to unite in shared values, transcend partisan rancor, and forge a common destiny. President Trump listed his accomplishments in the past 4 years, including economic success, rapid development of vaccines, and the construction of borders. In addition to making peace in the Middle East, he is also the first U.S. president in decades to not start a new war. President Trump also mentioned revigorating the U.S. alliance. He rallied the uniting countries around the world to face the Chinese Communist Party like never before. He emphasized that all of this was done in defense of the founding principles of the United States. He fought to protect the freedom of the people and to protect their faith in God. He also talked about the spiritual wealth of America. He talked about how to pass on the American spirit, putting aside partisanship. Throughout his term, the Trump administration has actually awakened Americans to their faith and reaffirmed their traditional values. He also condemned speech censorship, although he did not mention specific social platforms. He said that whatever technological means are used to censor speech and block it, they contradicted the founding principles of the United States. It is unacceptable. He said the movement to make America strong again has just begun. We don't know how many more years ahead of us. People have been expecting him to build a strong future governing team in the community and run for president again in the next election. In the past 4 years, President Trump has established his American presidential image and his own diplomatic strategy towards the Chinese Communist Party. These are the guidelines for the people to judge how good the new administration is. It certainly has a great influence on the new administration. The Democrats are eager to take over the White House and build socialism with American characteristics on January 20th. This will be an unprecedented shift in power. We can see that the White House is now dominated by the leftist thought paradigm. After the election, the entire Congress, which includes the House of Representatives and the Senate, will be led by the Democrats. As for the Supreme Court, it is very difficult to say whether these conservative judges can still adhere to the conservative standpoint when facing serious issues. Those are the three powers, but let's not forget that there is a fourth power in the United States. So what is it? It is the media. By the way, YouTube has been demonetizing and removing our content on this channel. So please consider supporting Eye Opener by donating to us and signing up to our newsletter. The link is in the description down below. Now let's get back into it. Let's talk about the United States and the capital city of Washington, D.C. This is an extremely blue place where no Republican mayors have ever been elected in the history of D.C. There is no one in the city council who is a Republican. In this deep blue city, the leftists have full control of power over the entire United States, and this is unprecedented. After Twitter blocked the accounts of Trump and his allies and launched a detailed plan for global speech censorship, Apple, Google, and Amazon joined forces to strangle Parler, which is an emerging conservative social media outlet. Parler has not yet been restored to service as of now. Presently, a leftist nonprofit group in Washington state has taken Apple to the federal court on the 17th, but it's still too early for celebration. The lawsuit is not that simple. Why did they sue Apple? It is because Apple did not effectively suppress the extremist speeches and remove Telegram from its software store after the protests at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. These were the reasons why they sued Apple. Because of the tightening rules of Twitter and the suppression of Parler, many right-wing conservatives have moved to Telegram, where they can share information in groups, so Telegram is also being targeted right now. Mike Lindell, who is an unofficial advisor to Trump, a well-known TV commercial celebrity in the U.S., and is also the CEO of MyPillow, he has become an immediate target for some of America's biggest companies because he recently spoke up for Trump. Some new large enterprises, such as Bed Bath & Beyond and Kohl's, also joined this round of suppression on MyPillow. They have taken Lindell's pillow products off their shelves. So Lindell's company has also encountered problems that are very similar to Parler's situation. Biden has just ascended to power, but he might be greeted by many lawsuits. As early as January 15th, the San Antonio Express-News, a Texas media outlet, reported that the state of Texas is preparing to file various lawsuits against the Biden administration. Joe Biden vowed to roll back the Trump administration's crackdown on immigration, push for climate change policies, and amnesty for thousands of American students in debt within the first 100 days of his administration. Texas will almost certainly fight Joe Biden's policies every step of the way. Many people expect Texas to revive dozens of cases against the Obama administration, such as the Clean Power Plan, the repeal of Obama's protection against trafficking of children into the country illegally, and the end of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. In a Sunday tweet, Governor Greg Abbott shared this Newsmax article and commented, "A new crop of Texas-led lawsuits await Joe Biden's White House. Texas will take action whenever the federal government encroaches on states' rights or interferes with constitutional rights, or private property rights, or the rights to earn a living." On January 18th, Trump signed an executive order prohibiting career bureaucrats, rather than presidential appointees, from authorizing and having the final word on new federal regulations. The order states the president chooses federal agency heads who exercise executive authority and implement his regulatory agenda. The American people, in electing the president, thereby have a role in choosing the individuals who govern them. However, some agencies have chosen to blur these lines of democratic accountability by allowing career officials to authorize, approve, and serve as the final word on regulations. This practice transfers the power to set rules governing America's daily lives from the president acting through his executive subordinates to officials insulated from the accountability that national elections bring. This practice undermines the power of the American people to choose who governs them, and I'm directly stepping in to end it. The order directs the new federal agency rules must be initiated and signed by senior appointees who will have the sole direct discretion to approve the agency's regulatory agenda. Trump has issued a flurry of executive orders on the final days of his first term. On Monday, he signed orders meant to protect Americans from overcriminalization based on violations of federal rules and defend the nation from the national security threats posed by China-made drones. On January 19th, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo issued the final blow to the Chinese Communist Party. He confirmed that the Chinese Communist authorities have committed genocide and crimes against humanity by suppressing Uyghur Muslims and other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang region. The U.S. Congress passed legislation on December 27th last year requiring the U.S. government to determine these crimes as considered crimes against humanity or genocide within 90 days. The Chinese Communist Party's so-called re-education camps in Xinjiang have been widely condemned internationally. Extensive multiple investigations have reported that the CCP authorities cracked down on the Uyghur minorities in the Xinjiang region, includes the mass incarceration of approximately 1 million people, their enforced re-education programs, high intrusive surveillance, religious persecution, forced sterilizations of women, and forced labor. The New York Times reported that the determination of the existence of atrocities in a country is a rare action in the U.S. State Department. The move is the last action taken by the Trump administration against the CCP in its last days in office. After more than a year of debate, it is the Trump administration's latest punishment for the most serious human rights violations committed by Beijing in decades. Other countries or international agencies may follow the U.S. lead and formally criticize the CCP's treatment of Muslim minorities and take punitive measures. This decision could also prompt the State Department to conduct further investigations. The Trump team did not leave this job to the next term. He's also sending the signal once again to the Biden team and emphasizes to the world that the CCP is not only the greatest threat to America, but is also the enemy of the world. Biden's Secretary of State nominee, Anthony Blinken, agreed with Pompeo's statement that the Chinese Communist Party's persecution of the Uyghurs was a genocide at this confirmation hearing on the 19th. At the same time, he said Trump was right to take a tough stance against China. And although he did not agree with all of Trump's approaches, he believed that there was a very strong bipartisan basis for a cross-party policy against China. His agreement on this issue clears up the position on the future U.S. strategy against the CCP. I would like to say on behalf of the Eye Opener team, God bless Melania, our First Lady, God bless America, God bless all of you out there watching, and God bless President Donald J. Trump. And thank you for your righteous service. Good night, everyone, and I'll see you next time.